Seraphine Vayne had learned, very early, that silence was the safest language. She had learned it the way most people learn dangerous things. Not from a book, not from a teacher, but from the slow accumulation of moments where speaking had cost her something. A meal, a warm place to sleep, the brief, terrible hope that someone might stay. She was 22 now, and she was very good at silence. She lived at the edges of Ironmore Pack, the most powerful wolf dominion on the northern continent, in a small stone room attached to the archive building. The room had one window. The window faced east. Every morning the light came through it at the same angle and landed on the same spot on the floor, and Seraphine had come to think of that patch of gold as the only thing in Ironmore that was reliably glad to see her. She was the only human-born child in a bloodline of werewolves. No one could explain it. No one had tried very hard. She carried no wolf inside her, no ability to shift, no bond to the land the way every other pack member did from birth. She was simply herself, small, quiet, precise, and the pack had decided a long time ago that simply herself was not enough. She worked in the archive. She documented rare herbs that grew at the pack's borders. She cataloged texts so old the ink had faded to the color of old tea. She was useful in the way that furniture is useful. People were glad it existed, until the moment they had to think about it. Her brother Kalen had been the one person who called her by her name like it meant something. Kalen, who had stood between her and the harder edges of pack life for years, had been exiled 3 weeks ago for refusing a direct command from the Alpha King. He had argued. The Alpha King did not tolerate argument. So now it was just her and the archive and the morning light. The assembly was called on a Tuesday. Dominance assemblies happened 4 times a year. The Alpha King stood at the front of the Great Hall, the pack arranged before him in order of rank, and he reaffirmed his authority over the territory. It was ritual. It was theater. Seraphine usually managed to avoid it by staying in the archive and pretending she had not heard the bells. This time she was standing too close to the door when it opened. She was escorted in with the others and placed near the back, which was where she always ended up, at the edges of things, slightly outside the frame. The hall smelled of stone and candle smoke, and the particular kind of tension that collects in rooms full of people who are performing confidence they do not entirely feel. Alpha King Aldrich Voss stood at the front. He was 29. He was tall in the way that certain men are tall, as if the height was not incidental but intentional, as if his body had made a deliberate argument. His eyes were pale gray, almost colorless, and he used them the way a judge uses a gavel. He looked at things, and they became decided. When the head elder, a woman named Thessaly, with silver hair and the expression of someone who had outlasted several generations of kings, asked Aldrich to acknowledge those pack members who carried no wolf bond, he looked across the room. His gaze landed on Seraphine. She felt it the way you feel a change in weather, before it arrives, in the pressure behind your ears. He said, in a voice designed to carry, "She is not pack. She is not wolf. She is worthless to this dominion." 400 people heard it. No one spoke. Seraphine found the crack in the stone floor. It ran from beneath the third bench to the base of the eastern wall, and it was shaped, if you looked at it right, like a river. She fixed her eyes on it, and held very still, and let his words become sound without meaning, the way you can do if you have practiced long enough. She was escorted out shortly after. She walked back to the archive. She sat at her desk. She lined up her ink jars, 3 black, 1 red, 1 gold, in a perfectly straight row. She did not cry. She had learned that too. 3 days later, she was given an assignment. The Ashwood was a protected forest at Ironmore's northern border, and it was home to the sacred wolves. Ancient wolf kind, older than any pack, older than any alpha's bloodline, bound not to any person or territory, but to the land itself. They tolerated no intrusion. 3 scouts had been sent to observe them this year. 2 had come back with injuries significant enough to require a healer. The 3rd had come back, and immediately requested a transfer to the Southern Territory. The assignment was presented to Seraphine as necessary research. She understood that it was punishment. She went anyway. There was nowhere else to be. She arrived at the tree line at dawn with a satchel of supplies and the archive's oldest field notes. which she had already begun annotating in the margins in her small, cramped handwriting. The forest was quiet in the way that living things are quiet, not empty, but listening. She walked until the trees thickened, and the light changed from gold to green. She found a place where the roots of an old tree had grown up, and out of the earth, in a shape that formed something close to a seat, and she sat down, opened her field notes, and began to write. She heard it before she saw it. Not a sound exactly, more like a presence, like the way a room changes when someone walks into it, except this was the forest changing. She looked up. The wolf was enormous, silver-white, the color of old snow, with eyes the color of bronze that has been outside for a long time. It stood at the edge of the tree line and looked at her, with an expression that she could only describe, later, as consideration. She did not run. She thought about it, briefly and practically, and concluded that running was for people who had not already been told they were worthless, in front of 400 witnesses. After that, most things lost their ability to frighten her. She sat very still. She looked back at the wolf. "I will be quiet if you will," she said out loud. Her voice sounded strange in the forest. Small, real. The wolf sat down. They stayed like that for 6 hours. The wolf did not move. She filled 4 pages of field notes. When the light started to shift toward afternoon, she stood, packed her satchel, and walked back toward the tree line. She looked back once. The wolf was watching her go. She came back the next morning. The silver wolf was waiting at the edge of the trees. Behind it, half visible between the trunks, were 2 others. She sat at the roots again and opened her notes. The wolves settled, one of the smaller ones, gray and young and radiating the particular energy of something that has not yet learned caution, crept forward by degrees until it was close enough that she could hear it breathe. She kept writing. She did not look at it directly. She had learned from years of working with nervous things. Old texts, frightened healers, pack members who needed help but could not admit it, that the fastest way to make something trust you was to need nothing from it. By the end of the first week, 3 sacred wolves met her at the tree line every morning. By the end of the second week, 7. They brought things to her. Once, a cluster of blood moss she had been trying to document for months, which she had never seen growing anywhere in the territory. Once, a carved bone, smooth from long handling, which she wrapped carefully and placed in the archive because it looked ceremonial and old. And once, a wolf pup. It was young, with one leg held at a wrong angle. It placed itself in her hands with the deliberate, trusting quality of something that had already made its decision. She splinted the leg with 2 sticks from the forest floor and the sash from her own waist, and held the pup still while it settled from frightened to calm, and felt something move quietly through her chest that she had no proper name for. She told no one about any of it. She was accustomed to keeping things to herself. But Ironmore had eyes. The border scouts watched. The elder council was informed. Aldrich was informed. The older texts described it in a single passage, which Thessaly located and read aloud to the council, in a voice that gave nothing away. A guardian claim, when sacred wolves chose a human protector, a keeper of the original covenant between wolfkind and the land. It had not been recorded in 400 years. Aldrich said the texts were being misread. He said the girl was feeding them. He sent an investigator. The investigator returned and reported that Seraphine had never brought food to the forest, not once. That the wolves gathered around her like she was a source of heat, pressing against her, following the movement of her hands across her notes with the relaxed attention of animals that have chosen to be exactly where they are. Aldrich sent a second investigator to report it differently. The second investigator reported the same thing. He came to the forest himself on the 14th day. He brought 2 elders, 4 guards, and the controlled expression of a man who had already decided what he would find and was prepared to be efficient about confirming it. He found Seraphine at the roots of the oldest tree in the ashwood. 17 sacred wolves, arranged around her in a loose half-circle, some sleeping, some watching the tree line with calm attention. The silver wolf, which Thessaly, standing beside Aldrich, recognized with a stillness that was not quite fear, had its enormous head across Seraphine's knees. She was reading aloud from her field notes. Her voice was even and quiet, and carried the particular rhythm of someone who had been doing this long enough that it was simply how she moved through the world. She looked up and saw Aldrich. She did not stand. She looked at him with an expression he could not categorize and waited. The silver wolf raised its head. It looked at Aldrich. Its bronze eyes held him the way old things hold new things, with patience, and with a certainty that did not need to announce itself. Then it stood, it moved to Seraphine's side, and it placed its head against her shoulder and exhaled, a long, low sound that was not a growl, and not a sigh but something older than either, something that vibrated in the bones of everyone present. Thessaly said, very quietly, beside him, "There it is." He told the council afterward that it changed nothing. Thessaly set down her tea. She folded her hands on the table. She looked at him with the expression of someone who has watched 50 years of kings make the same mistake, and has made her peace with the fact that she will watch 50 more. She said, "You are wrong." She explained it without drama. The guardian claim was not symbolic. It was structural. The sacred wolves predated the founding of every pack on the continent. Their claim on a person superseded pack law. Any dominion that harmed a guardian was in breach of the old covenant, and that covenant was not Aldrich's to revoke, because it had not been his to establish. His declaration of her worthlessness, she explained, had been made in front of 400 witnesses. It was in the formal record of the assembly, and it was, as of the moment the first wolf exhaled against Seraphine's shoulder, a recorded error. He would need to address it. He was quiet for a long time, long enough that the candles on the table had burned noticeably lower. "Arrange the assembly," he said. The same hall, the same 400, the same candle smoke and performed confidence. Seraphine stood in the center this time. She had dressed the same way she always dressed, simply, precisely, with her field notes satchel over one shoulder, because she had not thought to leave it behind. Thessaly stood to her left. The two elders flanked her. Outside the hall, through walls that could not quite contain the weight of their presence, 17 sacred wolves waited in the courtyard. The pack could feel them. Seraphine could feel the pack feeling them, a shift in the room's quality, like the moment before rain. Aldrich stood at the front. He looked at her once, briefly, before he began to speak. He said that a declaration had been made at the last assembly that was in error. He said that Seraphine Vayne held a status within the old covenant that preceded pack law, and that his authority did not extend to dismissing it. He said that his words at the prior assembly had been wrong. He did not say, "I was wrong." That small distance between the words and the truth, she heard it. She thought perhaps he was not yet capable of closing it, and that this was something he would have to find his way to on his own, in whatever time he had. It was not her job to wait for him. The formal record was corrected. Her name was entered into the covenant registry. She was given, without ceremony, her brother's exile papers. She could deliver them herself. He would be permitted to return. She took the papers. She held them carefully, the way you hold something you have wanted for long enough that receiving it feels more like relief than joy. She walked out. The crack in the floor was still there, running from the third bench to the eastern wall, shaped like a river. She went to the ashwood the next morning, as she did every morning. The first wolf was already there. It arranged itself around her with the ease of something that has decided and does not need to keep deciding. The others came through the trees in ones and twos, settling in the familiar half-circle, some pressing against her legs, one resting its enormous chin on her knee. She opened her field notes to a fresh page. She had new observations to record. The blood moss grew differently near the eastern roots than the text suggested. The wolf pup's leg had healed cleanly. The carved bone in the archive had markings she had identified last night as covenant script, which meant it was at least 400 years old, which meant someone before her had sat in these trees and been chosen, and had left something behind. She wrote for a long time while the forest listened. Kalen would be home by the end of the week. She had already begun to imagine the look on his face when she told him about the wolves. He would laugh, that loud, startled, genuine laugh he had, and then ask 17 questions, and she would answer all of them, because she had been saving things up to tell him for 3 weeks. She did not know what would happen next with Aldrich. She did not think about it much. But the northern tower at Ironmore had a window that faced the ashwood. She did not know this for certain. She had not been told. What she knew was that the first wolf sometimes lifted its head in the early morning, turned its bronze eyes toward the distant stone of the pack buildings, and watched something with the quiet patience of a thing that has decided to give a person time. She returned to her notes. The morning light moved across the roots in the same slow, golden way it moved across her floor. Everything grew very still. The forest breathed around her. She was, for the first time in 22 years, exactly where she was supposed to be.